Part 1. Jeff, Jim, and Carmela. I was attending the American University in Istanbul when I started hearing stories about an MI7 agent with a special gift who used this extraordinary gift to prevent the destruction of an air portion of the Bosporus. This story was so incredible, I decided to research it and include it in an article I was doing for a weekly magazine about Istanbul, Turkey. When I started the project, little did I know it would lead in all directions and send me to visit an assisted living home in Spokane, Washington. One of the Turkish veterans who was part of that operation shared all the information he could remember about the MI7 operative known only by the name of Jeff. He said he thought Jeff's widow was living in an assisted living home somewhere in Spokane, Washington. He said he thought her name was Carmela. I began to research all the assisted living homes in Spokane for a resident with the first name Carmela. I narrowed it down to the Valley Assisted Living Home on the east side of Spokane. If this was Jeff's widow, I wanted to speak with her about Jeff. I located a male nurse who was a friend of an Air Force buddy of mine. I asked him if he could find out if a woman named Carmela, living in the Valley Assisted Living Home, had a husband by the name of Jeff. He promised to get the information for me and would call me when he could confirm the information. After more than a week, I started to think that part of the story in my article would not materialize. Then he phoned me to say a man by the name of Jeff was her husband, but some said his name was Jim. That was all the information he could get without speaking directly to Carmela, and he informed me he would not do that. I determined I had enough information to almost assure myself this woman named Carmela was the Carmela I was looking for. I had nothing to lose, so I phoned the home where Carmela was living. When someone answered the phone, I introduced myself and asked if I could speak with Carmela. After telling them my name again, they said they would ask her if she would speak to me. I told them to tell her I was looking for information about her husband, Jeff. As I held the telephone receiver, I could hear all kinds of office sounds in the background. I could faintly hear a soft voice asking if it was the phone on the desk. Then a beautiful voice greeted me. "This is Carmela." I did not hesitate to give my name and tell Carmela I was doing a magazine article about Istanbul, and a man named Jeff, who did some spectacular work for the Turkish government. I told her I wanted to come to Spokane and speak with her about Jeff. Carmela did not hesitate when she told me I could come and visit her, but she did not know if she would share any information with me until after she could look me in the eye. Then she said, "Only then will I know if you will be the one I will share my life with. Keep in mind it is possible I may, after meeting you, decide not to share my story." I wanted to get all the information I could get about Jeff, so I was willing to make the trip to Spokane, hoping Carmela would be open to me after looking me in the eye. My desire to tell this story, and the way I would always mold all my thoughts in telling a story, gave me confidence she would work with me, so I traveled to Spokane. And I was confident Carmela would share her story. The day I arrived at the home, I was taken into a waiting room, and Carmela, in a wheelchair, was ushered into the room. She looked me square in the eye when she offered her hand. Her handshake was firm, and I instantly fell under her spell. She was beautiful, and her age and circumstance had not robbed her of her beauty. For a moment I was speechless as she continued to stare into my eyes, but I had a feeling I was communicating with her, so I continued to focus in on her eyes, never blinking or letting my eyes turn away from hers. Finally, Carmela relaxed and let her eyes return to a normal look. We exchanged pleasantries, and then she said, "After looking into your eyes, sir, I have decided I want to tell you the complete story about Jeff, Jim, and me." My heart was about to jump out of my chest after this first encounter with Carmela. My life was always embroiled in researching interesting stories, and I was financially able to go and move to any location to develop a book. I had written several bestsellers living in faraway places, but Spokane was not that bad or far away, so I was content in finding a temporary apartment in Spokane while I worked on this story. When I spoke to my publisher, she wanted to know if this would be worth a long stay in Spokane. I told her after that first meeting with Carmela, I was feeling like I had stumbled on to a fantastic Cold War story, and I was determined to write it. I moved to Spokane and began a lengthy discussion with Carmela. She appeared eager to tell about her life and the two men she had married. I could begin to feel like she was enjoying my visit, but I did not want her to enjoy my company more than her desire to tell her story. The assisted living home was comfortable, but I had the feeling Carmela wanted to escape and spend the rest of her life overlooking the Bosporus. I was not aware of Jim when I contacted Carmela because this story was instigated when I heard about the exploits of her husband Jeff. When I found out about Jim, I was even more convinced I had discovered something that would rival all my other books. Then Carmela began to tell me about her two late husbands. As I listened to her on the first meeting, I knew I had the makings of a best-selling book about the Cold War and not just about a magazine article. The story of Jeff, Jim, and Carmela was so involved, I decided the only way I could tell the story was in the third person. The only way I could do that was to try and take on the life of Jeff, Jim, and Carmela. As time passed, it became easier to do, and the way Carmela was sharing her life, I sometimes felt like I was not me but them. One part of this story was impossible for me to tell in the third person, so in that part I let Carmela tell it in her words and voice. A note about this story: someone other than me will be reading the words of Carmela. She will explain what happened that closed the chapters of her life with Jeff and Jim.